New Year's Eve close call. I am in London, UK. We are in a Tier 4 lockdown. Stay in your home, only go out for one shopping trip, or exercise, no mixing with people outside of your own home or support bubble etc. With a mutating strain of COVID-19 rampaging through London, hospital beds nearly at capacity and death toll rising, it made sense to stay indoors as much as possible. But every human being has a breaking point, and mine was 8 days of wandering around my one-bedroom apartment. I had talked myself out on Zoom and run out of conversations to talk to myself about. At 10 p.m. New Year's Eve I decided to get some air, allowed within the rules of Tier 4, and go for a quick walk the perimeter around the local park. All on main roads, takes about 40 minutes. The plan was to stop at a local grocery store and pick up a bottle of red wine on the way back, stepped out, with mask firmly affixed, and started walking. One thing that I was not prepared for was the eerily empty and almost silent streets. As it was just below freezing, I decided to hustle and cut through some side streets first, on hindsight a big mistake, navigating myself through very quiet side streets. I neared the park when I saw a van, Mercedes Sprinter size, turn in and rapidly approach me. Deciding to let them pass before crossing, I came to a halt. The van began to slow as it approached me. I could see the cab was occupied by two men, between 25 to 40 years of age. Then it stopped. Window rolled down. One man leaned out. "Hey friend. We are lost. Can you tell me to XXXX station?" The accent was not from the UK, and I am not going to state its origin, as I am not going to get into stereotypes. Alarm bells begin to ring out immediately. What was a van doing out at this time, and why directions to the local train station? In the middle of a Tier 4 lockdown, the van had stopped, so the side door was facing me. I stepped back a few paces and gave directions very quickly. I did not understand all. "I think best if you show us." With that he opens his door and the side door to the van is opens, to reveal another two men. I just turned and ran down the side street that I had emerged from. SHT take the van around. I follow him, knowing that these guys were fitter/younger than I. A foot race to my apartment building was out of the question. The only advantage I had was a head start and, hopefully, local knowledge of the streets. The side street leads into a larger street that has homes, all with large hedges. I ran past a few homes and entered the front garden of a house that had the most imposing and opaque hedge. It was unlit. I ducked down. Lucky for me, that house did not have a motion sensor light. Within a few seconds I could heard footsteps. They went past me. Stopped. I peeked through the hedge vegetation, very limited view, to see the man who had asked for directions. He was a few houses down from me and on the opposite side of the street. He was looking around. Then the sound of the vehicle. I thought, oh no, the van. Lucky for me it was a car. The man looked at his phone, looked around, pretending he was checking something, and then walked, leaving the residential street as quickly as possible. The car continued its way. I waited for another 10 minutes. Sitting behind the hedge in the front garden, practicing an explanation if the house lights came on. The house stayed unlit. And after my allotted time I rose and quickly walked back to my apartment building, keeping to shadows and reacting to every sound. I made it back. Bolted the front door. Only when I sat down did I understand what I had just avoided. All this for some air and bottle of red. I poured myself a black coffee and debated calling the police, but what would I say? Had anything really happened that they could act on? Intuition of being kidnapped or being in danger is not enough evidence. Plus, being a man, this would not be a priority, especially on a night that they would be overstretched on. I just waited in the new year, realizing that I had a lucky escape and that I should stock up on red wine at a more decent time. New Year's Eve, 1999. When I was 13, the dawning of a new millennium took place on New Year's Eve. While people were fearing the worst with the Y2K bug or out partying and drinking, I was home alone. In 1996 my parents had split up, and from there they divorced, and my mother and I moved across the country from Oregon to Tennessee with her best friend. On the eve of the year 2000 I was home alone, and my mother was currently out of state. Now this didn't worry me, as this was not the first time. I often came home to find a note on the kitchen counter saying they had gone to Florida for a few days and that there were groceries in the fridge. Since the divorce she was regularly leaving me alone for long periods of time to go to Florida. We lived on a relatively quiet road surrounded by trees and set a few miles out of town, and I knew most of the people, if not by name, then by face, enough to wave and small chat with, and had never before been given a reason to be afraid of being alone. On the night in question, I was staying up late watching television. I remember I was watching the movie His Bodyguard on USA Channel, and had most of the lights on in the house, not because I was afraid, but because at 13, I wasn't concerned with electricity bills or saving the environment. I felt completely safe and protected within my little bubble of home. As I was watching the movie, I kept hearing these weird sounds outside. But I remember thinking it was probably the neighbors. Though they weren't extremely close, a couple of them were having a party / people over for the holiday. About halfway into the movie, however, the power in the house suddenly went dead. I sat on the couch for a minute, just sort of in a panic daze, because it was near midnight and pitch black. I remember thinking the power must have gone out and that it would come back on, so I just decided to sit on the couch with my blanket and wait. A few minutes passed by when I heard a noise in the kitchen, where the back door is. My heart started racing in my chest, because I thought it sounded like the back door being shut. The back door sits just off the dining room, which is connected to the kitchen, which leads directly into the living room, where I was currently sitting on the couch. A few seconds passed after I had heard the sound, and I was straining my ears to pick up anything that wasn't supposed to be there. Every noise suddenly felt magnified. When footsteps sounded on the floor, I immediately slithered off the couch onto all fours, crawled around the ottoman, and started as slowly and as quietly as I could make my way toward the space between the love seat and the couch. I knew I could fit under the side table, and be completely hidden by the dark and the ottoman, from playing hide-and-go-seek in the dark many times with my friends during sleepovers. I was nearly there when the footsteps became more apparent. I knew from the sound of them that whoever it was making their way through the kitchen now toward the living room. They weren't hurried or anything, it was like they were just moving around in the kitchen. I glanced up from where I was crouched on the floor, and to my horror there was a dark silhouette standing in the archway between the two rooms. To my credit, I didn't scream, however I did panic. I stood immediately to my feet from my hiding spot, and ran down the hallway, and I believe the only reason I wasn't overcome was because the person chasing me had to get around the ottoman in the dark to follow me. I did what all children do when they're afraid. And I bypassed the front door, the guest bedroom, the bathroom, and ran to the farthest door down the hallway, my room. In all honesty, I probably wouldn't have been able to get the front door unlocked and open in time, as it was right off the side of the couch. When I was 10, I got a bird for my birthday. He was a blue-fronted Amazon, and I named him Boo, because it was October, and close to Halloween. Boo had a large, iron cage. It could have been metal, but very large, sturdy, and like 6 feet tall, and it was kept in my room, despite the fact that Boo, like me, pretty much had the run of the house whenever he wanted. This information will become relevant later in the story. As I ran into the room, I slammed the door shut and locked it. However, the lock was simply one of those little turn knobs that you can easily pop with a butter knife. I had barely gotten the door shut and locked when the person on the other side knocked on it. I have no idea why they knocked, if they did it to mock me or to scare me, but I knew in my heart that my little lock was not going to keep whoever it was on the other side out of my room. It didn't keep my mother out when we were arguing, and it wouldn't stand up to brute force. I was panicking, on the verge of tears, when the person started laughing. It was low, quiet, and because of that it was even more frightening. It wasn't like manic laughter, but as if they were genuinely amused. It was the laughter that really frightened me, and I started heavily, hysterically crying and looking around my room to figure out what I could do. That was when I realized Boo's cage would fit almost perfectly between the door and the wall of my closet. The cage moved quietly on my carpeted floor, but as I pushed it into place, it scraped against the door and alerted whoever it was on the other side that I was trying to barricade myself in, because suddenly they threw themselves at my door, and you could hear the sound of the wood splintering and the door handle being twisted violently. Boo, who had been stirred by the movement awake, began literally screaming and flapping his wings. I might have screamed with him, but honestly, I don't remember screaming. I just remember being extremely scared, terrified. I crawled under my bed/couch, a bunk bed with a futon on the bottom, metal, and waited. Several minutes passed and the person eventually stopped attacking my door. Boo continued screaming even after he had stopped. Though being under my bed gave me no feelings of being secure, I didn't come out from under it because I simply had nowhere else to go. I thought about trying to go out the window, but I was afraid he might expect it and therefore be waiting for me on the other side, and it was also several feet off the ground, as the house was built on a raised foundation. I remember laying under my bed, terrified, for what felt like hours. I must have fallen asleep because I awoke the next morning to daylight. The fear of what happened came back to me as soon as I registered where I was and why, and scared that whoever had been in my house might still be there. I decided to crawl out the window and run to a neighbor since it was daylight outside, and therefore I felt less afraid. Crawling out a window is a lot harder than it looks, and I did it less than gracefully, as I was not, and still am not, the most coordinated human being. Once I was back on my feet, however, I carefully made my way around the house, and that's when I noticed that the back door was wide open. Scared, but feeling braver now that I was outside and that it was morning instead of a pitch-black night, I walked up the back steps and peered inside. Seeing nothing out of the ordinary, no terrifying men leering at me, basically, I decided to go inside. Looking back, I cringe on how stupid this could have turned out, and that I wish I could have told my younger self to make the smarter move and just go get help, but thankfully, no one was inside the house. I did a terrifying, heart-pounding room-to-room check, looking in closets and under beds, behind the couch, anywhere I thought even a small child might be able to fit. I even popped the lock on my mom's bedroom so I could check it, and then relocked it afterwards. When I was positive there was no one there, I went back to lock the back door. I had left it open in case I needed to escape, and noticed that the breaker box on the opposite wall was open. The main switch had been pulled. I flipped it back on, locked both locks on the back door, checked all the windows and front door, and then called my mom, where I once again broke down crying hysterically. She called a coworker, who came and stayed the entire day with me as they drove back. My mom still took random trips to Florida after that, but I always went with her from then on forward. So terrifying, laughing crazy person that broke into my house on New Year's Eve. Please let's never meet again. I sincerely hope no other young girl had to meet you either. I don't know if you were just some drunk visitor of a neighbor, but you terrorized me that night. I was afraid of being alone when my mom was working, and to this day, I still get scared when I am home alone, overthink what I would do if someone came inside, and where I would hide. When my cats make noise out of nowhere, I immediately investigate for fear it's someone trying to get in. P.S. My mom had to help lift me back into my bedroom window so I could move Boo's cage out of the corner between my bedroom door and closet. We never had another incident at the house, and we moved in town to an apartment a year later. Great way to start off the new year. This happened almost 4 years ago in the early hours of New Year's Day. For reference, I was 17 at the time and in my senior year of high school. I'm a male and I am about 5 feet 10 inches and weighed about 160 pounds at the time. I lived in the suburbs and I was at a New Year's party being held by my friend at his house, which was a 20-minute walk away from my house. It was about 1 in the morning and I was about to leave with another friend of mine who lived on the same block as me. My friend who was hosting the party asked if we would like a ride home, and in hindsight, we probably should have accepted his offer, but our neighborhood was pretty safe and we figured that with the two of us walking together, no one would bother us. Plus there were probably other people at the party who needed a ride home more than we did. We said our goodbyes to everyone and began our walk home. The road was predictably empty with no one but us walking along the sidewalk and maybe the occasional car passing by. It was pretty well lit though, so we weren't walking in complete darkness. My friend wanted to pick up a pack of cigarettes on the way home, so we stopped off at a gas station along the way. When we got to the gas station it was nearly empty with only a woman at a pump filling up her car with gas and a guy posted up in front of the store on his phone. We went inside and my friend picked up a pack of cigarettes. We walked out of the store and my friend immediately lights a cigarette. We reach the sidewalk and we hear someone behind us yell, "Hey, wait." We looked behind us to see the guy who was in front of the store quickly walking towards us. He looked to be in his early to mid-20s. He was probably about 5 feet 8 inches and maybe 140 pounds from the looks of him. He approached us and asked if he could get a light. My friend and I didn't think much of it and he lit the guy's cigarette. The guy thanked him and my friend said, "You're welcome." We began walking away when the guy continued to follow us asking where we were going. We told him we were heading home and asked him where he was going. He said his friends were at a party and he was heading back over there as he left to get some fresh air for a bit. He asked us if we wanted to come to the party. This is officially the point where red flags start going off with this guy. Why the hell would a guy in his 20s ask two teenage boys if they wanted to go to a party with him? We told him bluntly that we didn't even know who he was, nor did we know anyone at the party he was talking about, so we weren't going. He starts laughing and says that we seemed like cool guys to party with. He told us we needed to let loose a little. My friend and I told him we were 18 and 17 respectively to see if maybe that would get him to leave us alone. He chuckled and said that age didn't matter to him and that he had a brother who was 16 and that he partied with him and his friends all the time. Jesus Christ, can this guy take a hint? I thought to myself. We were a little less than 10 minutes away from our houses and we didn't want this creep following us all the way there. I told him firmly, dude, we're not going anywhere with you. Now quit following us and fuck off. He gets livid and starts screaming at us for being unfriendly, inconsiderate assholes and that he was just trying to be nice. He then starts throwing racial slurs at my friend. It's probably worth mentioning by now that I'm white and my friend is black. My friend yells at him to get away from him before he cracks him in the face and the guy proceeded to run away from us. My friend and I looked at each other in complete disgust over what happened and spent the next 5 minutes walking and talking about the creepy guy. We both agreed that he was probably drunk or high from a New Year's party. Next thing we know, we hear a car behind us and proceed to slow down to match our pace. We see the windows roll down, which revealed the guy we had just seen a few minutes earlier with who we presumed to be two of his friends, one of which was a man who was probably the same age as the guy and a woman in the back seat who had to have been in her mid-30s. The guy tells us that we got off on the wrong foot and asked us once again to join them at the party. My friend and I looked at each other and I whispered to him that we needed to get away from them. My friend tells them that we're not going with them and to leave us alone already. The guy was silent for a few seconds and said, "You're coming with us. One way or another." They pull over and quickly get out of the car, which caused my friend and I to immediately go into flight mode. We turned right on a side block and my friend yelled, "Run to the park. We'll lose them in there." We looked behind us and to our horror, the three people were running right for us. We run into the park and we once again look behind us and they're getting closer. We run into the dark, thick patch of trees that covered a good portion of the west side of the park, hoping to evade them. I was panicking at this point because I couldn't see a damn thing and I was worried that my friend and I would trip over something and get captured by one of those sick freaks who wanted to do who knows what with us. We hear one of them trip and fall behind us yelling, "Fuck." And luckily we see light again and we made it to another path in the park and we made a left onto the path. We heard yelling behind us and one of the guys said that they lost us. The woman yells to split up and search around the park for us. We bolt toward the bathrooms, which thankfully were open, and we hide inside. We took a minute to catch our breath as our lungs were practically burning at that point. We should have called the cops and just hid until they got there, but at the time we were so focused on getting the hell away from those crazy people that we decided to try and make our way to the nearest exit out of the park and run to my house. We waited for about 2 minutes and we bolted out of the bathroom and toward the park exit. Shortly before we exited the park, we heard one of the guys yells behind us that he found us and we were getting away. We looked behind us to see the guy in the distance starting to chase after us. We ran until we reached my house and I quickly opened the door. We ran inside, and I quickly locked it. We went into my living room and collapsed on the couch. We both sat there silently, trying to regain our energy and calm down after what had happened, hoping they didn't see where we ran to. I looked out the window several times over the course of 10 minutes and thankfully, they never showed up again. We talked about it and we were glad that we were both okay and that nothing bad happened to us. We were trying to figure out what they wanted with us. Did they want to kill us, rob us, have sex with us? God only knows. My friend hung around for another half hour before he insisted on heading home. He left and then I went to bed. I kept thinking about what had happened and pondered on what would have happened if they caught me. Even as I'm typing this, I still have those thoughts. I eventually fell asleep and I woke up and told my parents what had happened. They were thankful that my friend and I were okay, but were upset with us that we chose to walk home and should have accepted the lift from my other friend or even called them and they would have picked us up. Regardless, we filed a police report and I gave them all the information I could. Unfortunately, we never heard anything about it again and I wonder sometimes what the hell they've been doing ever since. I really hope they never harmed another person after that. I can't express enough how thankful I am that we managed to get away from those freaks, and to this day, this incident is still the scariest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. This incident definitely made me more wary of my surroundings, and I try my best to avoid situations where I need to walk late at night, whether I'm by myself or not. I don't know what would have happened had those people got their hands on me. But I do know one thing. I never want to meet those people ever again.